Dear students, good morning to all of you. Today we are going to discuss some basics of secondary nutrients, calcium, magnesium and sulfur, and some micronutrients, iron, manganese and boron. So we'll see what are their major roles in related to plant growth and reproduction, and also see their deficiency symptoms, and also see the conditions, soil conditions where they are deficient. And finally, for each nutrient element, we will see how to overcome the deficiency. And it is not just deficiency, many times excess of a particular nutrient may not be good for plant growth. So terminology, I think you know what is rock, what is mottling. Mottling means spots or blotches. धब्बे होते हैं. These are spots or blotches of different color, or mosaic of color, you can say, or shades of color interspersed with the dominant color. So one dominant color will be there. Then you will get some lighter colors or many variety of colors, smaller spots around it. pH dependent charge, the portion of the total charge of the particles that is affected by and varies with the changes in soil pH, contributed to soil pH, that is your pH dependent charge. Necrosis is death of tissues. And citrophore, or sometimes you call them phytocidrophore, phytocidrophore, because they come from the plants. Therefore, they are called as phytocidrophores. They can also come from certain microbes also, but when they come from plants, they are phytocidrophores, a known porphyrin metabolite secreted by certain microbes that form a highly stable coordination compound with iron. So they act as chelating agent. Protein, you know, root nodules, you know. Now we start with the secondary nutrients, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. They are very, very important, and they play a very important role in plant nutrition, particularly by influencing the soil pH. By affecting the soil pH, indirectly they affect the nutrient availability. For example, if sulfur is deficient in your soil, then you will have generally means higher pH, neutral to alkaline pH. If you increase the sulfur, it acidifies the soil environment. So under such conditions, if you have sufficient sulfur in soil, it can increase availability of iron. So likewise, these secondary nutrients are related to their own availability, but as well as they can influence the availability of other nutrients in soil. So they are not really secondary in nature, or they are not secondary in plant nutrition. Each and every element or nutrient have equal role in the plant growth. Although secondary nutrients are needed in lesser amounts than that of primary nutrients, but they are important for plant. Now we start with calcium, and then we will see magnesium, sulfur, etc. So availability is adequate for most crops when soils are limed or to properly adjust soil acidity. Means your neutral to alkaline soils are not deficient in calcium. It is mostly acidic soils where you get calcium deficiency. So there are certain other kind of soils like your sandy soils from which available calcium has been leached down. In high rainfall areas, calcium may leach down, and on a strongly acid peat and muck soil where total soil calcium is low. So these are the kind of soils where we can experience calcium deficiency. Also, high exchangeable sodium may depress plant uptake of calcium. So this sodium, calcium, and magnesium, and also potassium, many times they can work for each other also in soil as well as for in the plant system also. What are the roles or importance of calcium in plants? It ranks with magnesium, phosphorus, and sulfur in the group of least abundant macronutrients in plants. So it is not that you have very high concentration of calcium in plants. It is absorbed by plant roots as divalent cation Ca2+. It is part of architecture of cell walls and membranes. So that thus it gives strength to the plant. Cell division, very, very important for cell division, for growth, for root lengthening, and activation or inhibition of enzymes. So this is also important role, and it is immobile in the phloem. If it is immobile in the phloem, then its deficiency symptom will come on younger tissues. Deficiency may lead to reduced growth, death of growing tips. This is important, death of growing tips, blossom and root of tomato. Certain disorders can also happen in the plants, poor fruit development and appearance. So indirectly, it also affects the quality of the fruits, like your potassium. What happens if you have deficiency of calcium? Seen first on growing tips or younger leaves, applicable to all immobile nutrients. As you see, case of boron also, deficiency symptom come on the younger leaves. Leaves become smaller in size, they may be distorted, cup-shaped, crinkled, and dark green. They cease growing, the growth is stopped, become disorganized, twisted, and under severe deficiency, die. The groundnut shell may be hollow or poorly filled, incomplete kernel development. This is important for all the crops, but for groundnut, it has special importance, as the deficiency of calcium in groundnut may lead to hollow or poorly filled, incomplete kernel development. So you can see in maize, this is ladder-like structure, and the two tips of two leaves can join each other. You can see here the growing parts are affected. Here on the right side, you can see the twisting of leaves. And in rice, you can see on the left side, calcium deficiency symptom of rice. Tips of the youngest leaves may become chlorotic white. This is symptom of calcium deficiency in rice. And in tomato, you get blossom and root of tomatoes. What is meant by blossom? Blossom is generally people take equivalent to flower. So the flower of a seed plant is blossom. The mass of such flowers on a single plant, the state of bearing flowers is also called as blossom. A peak period or a stage of development, develop or come to a promising stage, the period of greatest prosperity or productivity. So this blossom word has many other meanings also. Now you can see in banana, you can see the twisting of leaves. Here you can see the growing part. The growing part is getting twisted. The discoloration of apple, you can see the quality of apple is affected by calcium deficiency. You can see here this twisting of younger leaves. You can see in maize, and here you can see ladder-like structure. The tips ends of leaves glued together. This is quite common symptom of calcium deficiency in cereals, particularly maize, palm millet, and sugarcane. You can see it is in palm millet. Palm millet, you can see these kind of symptoms of calcium deficiency. This is in sugarcane, ladder-like structure, and on these sides also you can see this gluing of leaf tips together. I have practically seen this deficiency symptoms in sugarcane. Last time I visited some village and I have seen it practically also. I got pictures of calcium deficiency in sugarcane. So it is like this. And then coming to what happens when you have calcium in excess in your soils. So excess calcium may cause deficiency of either magnesium or potassium. It can compete with magnesium and potassium for uptake. So you need to have balanced level of nutrients in the soil. What are the areas? Mainly it is deficient in acid soils, and how to correct the deficiency, correct the soil pH. And you know how to correct the soil pH. Any student who can tell me how to correct the soil pH? If your soils are acid in nature, how can you neutralize these soils?
Liming.
Sir, use of lime.
Liming can be done. Okay. Any other way to correct the soil pH except liming? Think over it. Now magnesium. After calcium, we come to magnesium. Any question on calcium? Now coming to magnesium, it occupies the central spot in chlorophyll, thus vital for photosynthesis. You know that magnesium is a part of or constituent of chlorophyll. If magnesium is not there, chlorophyll molecule will not be there. How many nitrogen are there in one molecule of chlorophyll?
4.
4.
No.
Sure? I'm not saying you are incorrect. I'm saying, are you sure? Any other student? Okay, just check it whether your 4 number is correct or not. Now, other role of magnesium is activation of enzymes, energy transfer, maintenance of electrical balance, production of proteins, metabolism of carbohydrates. This is important, metabolism of carbohydrates. Magnesium is mobile within the plant system. Therefore, deficiency will come on older leaves or older plant parts. So deficiency symptoms, it is readily translocated. So deficiency symptom will come first on older parts. Intervenal chlorosis, this is important. In magnesium deficiency, you can get intervenal chlorosis, means the area between the veins will get yellow or chlorotic on older leaves, in which the veins remain green, but the area between them turns yellow. Poor fruit development and production. Now you can see how this magnesium deficiency is affecting the maize crop. On the right side, you see 3 pictures are there of leaf. So it starts initially with the intervenal chlorosis on mid-section of the leaf. So it starts from the middle section of the leaf, you can see here. And then if the deficiency of magnesium continues, then you will see intervenal chlorosis covers the entire leaf. So it will move to the entire leaf, older leaf. And finally, you can see necrosis in intervenal areas of the leaf. You can see the reddening. Reddening is happening, means there is no chlorophyll. So chlorophyll has been lost from such leaves. And you can see deficiency symptoms of magnesium in cowpea. This is cowpea. I'm sorry, this is mung bean plant, not cowpea. This is mung bean. Stunted plant showing severely deficient bottom leaves. You can see lower leaves, moderately deficient middle leaves. Middle leaves, you can see put your eyes. You can see it is light. It is more green than the lower leaves and normal top leaves. Now you see in cotton. Interestingly, you can see here it is reddening of the leaves. Reddening of the leaves. So many times students will get confused that, okay, this is phosphorus deficiency. Because in phosphorus deficiency, you get colored leaves. Dark green color, of course, dark green color is not there here, but you find some kind of coloration of the leaves. So manganese deficient plant showing reddening of the lower leaves. You can see this reddening is happening, reddening of leaf margins advancing into intervenal areas while veins are green in this case. Then in number 2, if deficiency continues, reddening intensified into intervenal tissues while veins look prominent and green in this case. Reddening turns into brown necrosis. Then from red they will become brown, and necrosis means they will die. At this stage, at the stage 3, if you apply magnesium or supply magnesium sulfate spray, whatever you want, they will not recover back because necrosis has happened. Now, what will happen if you have magnesium excess? High concentration tolerated in plants, however, imbalance with calcium and potassium may reduce the growth. Higher concentration will not give any toxic symptoms, but there may be imbalance with calcium and potassium, because in that case, More calcium uptake means reduced uptake of calcium and potassium. Therefore, the role which was being played by calcium and potassium will be affected. Therefore, indirectly, the excess magnesium can affect the growth of the plant. Now, after calcium and magnesium, sulfur is also secondary nutrient, important plant nutrient, and it is becoming more and more limiting day after day. Means with time, its deficiency is increasing, and I have already shown you the data of India, how much percentages of soils are deficient in sulfur. So what are the reasons? One is that higher crop yields require more sulfur. So sulfur uptake is roughly equivalent to phosphorus uptake. So of course, not as high as your potassium or nitrogen, but uptake of sulfur and phosphorus is also there, which may be say around 20-25 kg per hectare uptake. So with time, if you harvest 2-3 crops in a year, with time, your soil will not be able to supply adequate sulfur, and they will become deficient in sulfur, mainly because of intensive cultivation. Increased use of high analysis fertilizer containing little or no sulfur. Now you see farmers are using more of NPK fertilizer, more of DAP, more of straight fertilizer like urea or potassium chloride. But previously farmers were using more of single superphosphate. Ammonium sulfate was also being used. So certain sulfur containing fertilizers were used by farmers. So their consumption has declined. Now SSP consumption has very sharply declined over last 20 years. Farmers are not interested to buy single superphosphate for very long time. Instead, they preferred DAP, diammonium phosphate, over single superphosphate, which contained some quantity of sulfur also. So my two questions are there to students. How much sulfur content is there in ammonium sulfate and single superphosphate? How much sulfur is there in ammonium sulfate and single superphosphate? Chandrakant.
Sir, SSP means sir 10 to 12%. SSP.
SSP 12% and in ammonium sulfate?
Sir, I think 23 sir.
Okay, no, you have some idea. Rimji, how much is sulfur in ammonium sulfate?
Sir, I think 24%.
Anybody who is sure?
So 24%.
So 24.
24%.
Ammonium sulfate and 12% in SSP.
SSP 12%. So some sulfur was coming from these sulfur containing fertilizers. Of course, they were basically used for other nutrients. Like SSP was supplied for your used to supply phosphorus, but it also supplied sulfur as well as calcium. Similarly, ammonium sulfate will supply you sulfur. So actually, consumption of these fertilizers have declined over years. And now another question is why farmers have switched over single superphosphate and they prefer diammonium phosphate, DAP.
Sir, because of high nitrogen, because DAP also provides nitrogen.
Okay, any other idea?
Sir, because the overall nutrient content of DAP is more, so it will require less, cost to transport it. That's why.
Yeah, that is good idea. That is good idea. And but that could be at number 2. I will place at number 1 the adulteration of single superphosphate. Actually, what happened? Farmers could easily be fooled by some people. They will take simple pebbles of bajri, bajri they will take from market, and they will just make the size equivalent to SSP grains, and then they will sell in the market. So actually, this adulteration or impurities, and there was no proper control of enforcement agencies. So therefore, the single superphosphate lost its effectiveness. So that was number 1 reason. And second, what just now somebody said that you need more of more quantity of the single superphosphate to support, because concentration is less, so transport cost, handling cost, application cost will be high. Therefore, DAP would be better choice. So that is there. And third, somebody said nitrogen also. Okay, in one go, you can supply phosphorus as well as nitrogen. So if you want to give 3 reasons, so you can sequence them like this, 1, 2, 3. Then reduce amounts of atmospheric sulfur fall out from sky. That is another reason. Maybe people were using less of sulfur containing fungicide or pesticides. So now use of sulfur containing fungicides have also declined. And reduce soil reserve from organic matter, losses due to mineralization. So we are losing organic matter, and like nitrogen, sulfur is also tied to the proteins. So if your organic matter is lost, that means proteins or sulfur and nitrogen both are lost. More sulfur in soil is tied up to, okay. Now, role of sulfur in plants. So definitely it is part of certain essential amino acids, cysteine, cysteine, and methionine. So these are the 3 sulfur containing amino acids essential for protein production. How many essential amino acids are, or how many amino acids are essential for human nutrition? Number of amino acids which are essential for human nutrition. Anybody? Kanchan?
Sir, 10.
10 for child, I think. 9 for adult.
9.
Anybody can correct me if I am wrong. I
So
was
9.
9 for adults, I think, and 10 for children. It is like this, so you can check it. Anybody knows the names?
Sir, histidine and arginine are considered as semi-essential.
Okay. So you can check the list, and it is very easy to remember them if you make some acronym. Acronym, like I make some acronyms to remember the things. So you can make AHILLMPTTV, something like this. So that way you can remember it. Anyway.
So only 8 are essential now. 2 are excluded as arginine and histidine are semi-essential.
Thank you very much. I had no idea. I was taught 30, 40 years before. So I just remembered that it was like this. So thank you for updating. And you correct yourself also. It is also necessary for formation of chlorophyll and activation of enzymes. So you see very important role in formation of chlorophyll. Of course, it is not part of chlorophyll, but it helps in the formation of chlorophyll. That is why whenever you have sulfur deficiency, you will see chlorosis. So chlorosis is the first symptom of sulfur deficiency. It is part of the vitamins biotin and thiamine B1. Most plants, it is about 0.2 to 0.3% of dry matter. Similar is the concentration for phosphorus. Needed for formation of mustard oil and sulfhydryl linkages that are the source of pungency in onion oils. Required for crops in amounts comparable with phosphorus. Deficiency is initial yellowing of young leaves, spreading to whole plant. Similar symptoms to nitrogen deficiency, but occurs on new growth or younger plants. Deficiency symptoms in plants. So symptoms on young leaves come first, and it resembles that of nitrogen. And you already know that it comes on younger leaves. And plants are small with short and slender stalks. Growth is retarded and maturity in cereals is delayed. And one more point, you can add to it how to identify the sulfur deficiency. If you apply nitrogen to the soil, then the deficiency symptoms are not recovered. If upon application of nitrogen, chlorosis is not over, that means it is also because of sulfur deficiency. So this test takes 1 week time, because this urea nitrogen is made available in about 1 week time. So you can see chlorosis due to sulfur deficiency in maize. And then this is black gram or urd bean. Many of you may not have seen this plant, black gram plants. So see it carefully. It looks like bone bean plant with certain differences. And mainly here in black gram, you get the length and breadth ratio of leaves is wider in black gram and it is narrower in mung bean or green gram. And you can see the sulfur deficiency symptoms in groundnut, yellowing or chlorosis of younger leaves. And in cotton, you can see quite clear or evident symptom. So what are the areas affected by sulfur deficiency? Light texture soils with low organic matter. So definitely light texture soils or sandy soils are in general deficient in many nutrients because leaching is quite fast, quite easy in those soils. Canal irrigated areas where sulfur-free fertilizers are used, acid soils are more prone to sulfur deficiency due to stronger absorption of sulfate. What is more prone to sulfur deficiency? Wheat is more prone to sulfur deficiency than rice. What can be done to supply sulfur? Apply gypsum at the rate of 125 to 150 kg per hectare to soil, followed by mixing and a light irrigation. This is particularly for groundnut crop and areas where you get deficiency, and these are very general recommendations. So how gypsum works? Gypsum works actually through formation of sulfuric acid. This gypsum contains sulfate, and this sulfate will make sulfuric acid, and then hydrogen ions will replace the calcium how this gypsum works, how it, I'm sorry, I went wrong. Yeah, it will supply sulfur. Gypsum will supply sulfur in the form of sulfate, making sulfuric acid, and that can be taken up by plants. Use single superphosphate in sulfur deficient soils. Now iron.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, why a wheat is more sensitive to sulfur than rice?
Why is wheat more sensitive to sulfur than rice? Actually, what happens? Rice is generally taken under moist conditions. Moist conditions, or you see, water is there most of the time. Water is there. Under those conditions, you get sulfur availability is increased. Sulfur availability is increased under this flooding situation. In wheat, you do not have flooding situation. So in case of sulfur, in case of wheat, the supply of sulfur is low compared to rice. I will teach you in rice, or maybe other reason maybe. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I spoken wrong thing here, and it is actually I take those words back. You can see this is individual sensitivity of the plants. Even within a group of plant, you can get some varieties may be sensitive to availability of a particular nutrient, some may not. So maybe some differences in their root, some differences in their physiology. Because of those physiological reasons, it is possible that wheat is more sensitive to sulfur deficiency than iron than rice. Okay. If anybody
Okay.
knows, yeah. Wheat is more prone to sulfur deficiency than rice. Maybe some genetic causes or genes causes your physiological changes or affects the physiological reactions in plant. So I know this much, but if anybody knows more, can come up. It is more prone to sulfur deficiency than rice. Because even in plants, you see some plants are tolerant to acidic conditions. Some plants are tolerant to even high sodium percentage, high.
I think as rice is mainly grown under the submerged condition, so it mostly attains a neutral pH in that condition. And in case of neutral pH, most of the nutrients are more available. That's why I think wheat is more sensitive.
That is,
Because
yes, please, yes, sir, please.
yes, sir, that can be one of the reasons. Because that's why there is no such nutrient deficiency in rice, especially under the submerged condition.
That is true. That is true. That is true. Yeah, we need to see from that angle also. Actually, I was telling initially from that angle also. And then I taken my own words back on that point, because there will be less formation of sulfate also. Because sulfur is taken up in the form of sulfate. And also some sulfate is converted into H2S, hydrogen sulfide. So it is not that we have very high availability of sulfate in those soils, because rice or any other plant will take up sulfur in the form of sulfate. So if we take those things into account, then there may be some physiological variations or variability in wheat and rice plants. That is why one is sensitive, other is somewhat tolerant. So really we need to see this point in detail. It is first time somebody has asked me this question. So I will surely try to find answer, the right answer of it. We move forward to iron, and it is necessary for synthesis of chlorophyll, carbohydrate production, cell respiration, chemical reduction of nitrate and sulfate, and in nitrogen assimilation or protein synthesis. So variety of role are there performed by iron. And you see some enzymes and other proteins in which iron functions in plant metabolism, where it is necessarily required. So you can see it is part of enzymes or proteins like catalase, peroxidases, lag hemoglobin, ferridoxin, and aconitase, superoxide dismutase, succinic dehydrogenase, cytochrome. And you can see variety of enzymes. It is involved. And you can see what are the functions. You can go through it. I will share this PowerPoint. So you can see what are the important roles of these enzymes for which iron is necessary. Now, iron deficiency, initial distinct yellow or white areas between veins of young leaves. So initially you have yellow color, yellowish or greenish color, or loss of chlorophyll you can see, and white areas between veins of young leaves, younger leaves, to spots of dead plant tissues or dead leaf tissues. In severe deficiency, the young leaves turn entirely white. So symptoms you can remember, very easy to remember. Initially, there will be yellowing of young leaves. After yellowing of young leaves, they will convert to white color. And after white color, they will convert to brown color. So this is actually sequence from yellow color to white and white to brown. And brown means dried. They have already dried leaves. So what happens when you have iron in excess? Possible bronzing of leaves with tiny brown spots. So you can get iron excess also under acidic soils. Toxicity is also observed. Iron uptake by plants. This is important. Many times students know that iron is preferred by plants, particularly rice, as ferrous. So ferrous form Fe2+ is considered as soluble iron, or iron which is easily taken up by plants. Rice also prefers ferrous form, and other plants can use ferric form. Rice cannot use ferric form. Rice can use only ferrous form. But many other aerobic plants like wheat, sugarcane, or all other plants, irrespective of their families, they are able to take up iron in ferric form. So they have got different mechanism of iron uptake. And in rice, those kind of mechanisms are not available. So it requires only ferrous. So iron appears to be acquired in sufficient quantities for growth even though it may not be readily available. Actually, what happens in soils, there is no deficiency of iron. By weight, if you see, soils have 6% iron by weight. Suppose there is 100 kg weight of soil, then this soil has 6 kg iron. But all iron is not in available form, that is ferrous form for rice. Or some iron, that get precipitated and it is not available. And some iron may be in minerals. So therefore, not all iron is available. But the availability is less under aerobic conditions. Under anaerobic condition, it solubilizes, it becomes ferrous. So plants use two distinct strategies to solubilize and absorb iron from the soil. Number one, that plants have ability to reduce Fe3. Some plants, aerobic plants, have ability to reduce Fe3 complexes at the root surface and absorb the Fe2 ions produced via this root-associated reduction. It includes all dicots and monocots not included in the poaceae. Plants reduce Fe3, means plants themselves are reducing Fe3. It is not the soil. It is plants, they have ability to reduce Fe3 to Fe2. And they can complex at the root surface and absorb the Fe2 now. Ions produced via this root-associated reduction. So this reduction of Fe3 to Fe2 was made by certain, by plants, by releasing some chemicals or biochemicals and making it ferrous. And then they take it as ferrous. It includes all dicots and the monocots not included in the poaceae. So poaceae members do not have this mechanism, but all others have this mechanism. Number two, plants excrete specific Fe3 binding low molecular weight organic polydentate ligands known as phytosidrophores. So plant releases some specific chemicals, or those are called as phytosidrophores, which solubilize Fe3 and ions and make them available for absorption. Now these phytosidrophores will solubilize this Fe3 and plants can take up that Fe3. So this applies to wheat plant, poaceae, restricted to the grass family. All grass family members, this have mechanism, except rice. In rice, we do not have such mechanism. For rice, it has to reach as ferrous form near the roots, then it can take up. But other members of poaceae have ability to release phytosidrophores, through which these plants take up iron for their growth. Now you can see the iron deficiency symptoms in rice. This is chlorosis, you can see. This deficiency happens mainly in upland conditions. And upland conditions means aerobic conditions. Under those conditions, iron is always present as ferric form. You do not have any ferrous iron. So if your rice is grown under aerobic condition, you will have deficiency of iron in rice because you do not have any ferrous form. So in maize, you can see the chlorosis, iron chlorosis, deficiency chlorosis. You can see here, veins are green. You can see in groundnut, this is typical deficiency symptoms of iron deficiency. Quite contrast. See, lower leaves are green, but these upper leaves are not green. They are yellow, but there you can see here and there, their veins are green, somewhat green. Now see, in case of rice, this is direct seeded rice. So you can say initially it comes in the young leaves and yellowing starts, and you can see white leaves also here. White leaves. Then this can progress to the lower leaves. However, in this picture, you can see some of the right side, some of the lower leaves are still green, but younger leaves are yellow and white. So you can see this is deficiency in nursery, rice nursery area. You can see iron deficiency, whitening of leaves. From yellow, they become white. And you can see lower side, they are green because water is stagnating. In this part, you can see this is very typical sandy loam soil. So here water is not staying, water logging is not happening. Therefore, they are yellow. But lower side where water logging is there, that means here you have anaerobic conditions or reduced conditions where iron is present as ferrous. So here you don't have any deficiency. Same case you can see in advanced stage of that last nursery. You can see this, or maybe the close-up you can see iron deficiency in rice nursery. This is in direct seeded rice. You can see the patches where water is not standing, not wet, quite wet. You see iron deficiency there. But this area is looking green. This is somewhat low area, low-lying area in the field. So here you see green plants. So 100% this is iron deficiency in direct seeded rice. And not only direct seeded rice, if you have transplanted rice also, but it is not flooded like in this picture you see, it is not flooded, it is just wet. So some oxygen must have entered here and that has converted ferrous iron to ferric iron. So therefore you can see some yellowing iron deficiency in these pictures. And see in this picture also, there is no standing water. It is transplanted rice, but you can still see iron deficiency in plants. You can see this, all plants are affected by iron deficiency. So what are the areas that are affected by iron deficiency? So definitely soils with porous texture, high pH, calcium carbonate, high calcium carbonate, and low organic matter. Soils may have your iron deficiency. Most common in highly permeable porous soils where iron leaching can happen. Soils irrigated with sodic waters. Soils with high accumulation of heavy metals like nickel, lead, cadmium, zinc, inhibit uptake and translocation of iron. So these ions actually compete for iron uptake with iron uptake. Reasons: high permeable soils cannot pond water. That is another problem. Light texture soils, they cannot pond or they can't keep water logging. Soils may not be deficient in iron, but it remains in unavailable form like in ferric form. What can be done if you have deficiency? Ensure prolonged ponding of irrigation water. So best way in rice is to keep the ponded water. You will not have any iron deficiency. However, it is not possible to keep ponded water in many other crops. So in those aerobic crops like wheat or other, they have developed another kind of mechanism. These plants have ability to convert ferric to ferrous and then take up. But rice has no such mechanism. Only ways that you have to keep the water ponded so that iron remains in ferrous form, and then rice will be happy. If applied to soil under oxidized conditions or in alkaline soil, it gets converted to unavailable form. So dear students, some trials have been conducted by International Rice Research Institute. And we have also conducted one trial for 2 years on iron deficiency in direct seeded rice. And it was observed that you apply any dose of iron sulfate fertilizer, you get ferrous sulfate heptahydrate fertilizer. You can apply say 200 kilogram per hectare or 300 kilogram per hectare of iron sulfate. There is no response. If your soils are aerobic, means direct seeded rice. If soils are flooded, no deficiency of iron. But if your soils are aerobic, direct seeded rice, you apply fertilizer, ferrous sulfate, there will not be any response even up to 250 kg per hectare. So therefore, it is not suggested to correct the iron deficiency in rice by or any other crop by applying ferrous sulfate fertilizer in solid form. Only way is to apply foliar spray. Foliar spray can correct the iron deficiency up to some extent. So for micronutrients like iron, manganese, copper, these three micronutrients, iron, manganese, copper, the best way to correct their deficiency is through foliar spray of respective fertilizer. And mainly sulfate of fertilizers are used. Copper sulfate, ferrous sulfate, manganese sulfate, these are sulfate forms. Even if you want to supply nickel, you need to use nickel sulfate. So sulfates of these fertilizers are normally used. for soil application as well as for foliar application. But soil application should not be preferred in case of iron, manganese, and copper. However, it should be preferred in case of zinc. So you can see foliar spray of 0.5 to 2% solution of ferrous sulfate can be done in rice. And why this range is there, 0.5 to 2%? This range is because when your plants are initially young, initially seedling stage, if you have deficiency symptoms, go for 0.5% solution. If your plants are growing, they have accumulated some quantity of dry matter, then they can tolerate higher levels of iron sulfate. At tilling or at later part of the tilling stage, you can go for 2% solution of ferrous sulfate. It will be acceptable to rice. But if you spray 2% solution of ferrous sulfate in nursery area or in seedling stage, then that can be very harmful to the rice. So go for 0.5% solution of ferrous sulfate at seedling stage. Green manuring with dhacha before transplanting of rice can help. It can acidify the soil and it can increase the iron availability. Acidification means it can solubilize some fixed iron. Now, manganese, known to activate several enzymes, it is essential for splitting of the water molecule during photosynthesis. You know, it produces hydrogen and chloride, hydrogen and oxygen. Manganese is also important in nitrogen metabolism and in CO2 assimilation. Manganese deficiency, interveinal yellowing or mottling of leaves. And mottle means color with streaks or blotches of different shades. Manganese excess. Older leaves have brown spots surrounded by a chlorotic circle or zone. Crinkle leaf of cotton due to manganese excess. Now we see this manganese deficiency in maize, in potato. Areas affected by manganese deficiency, highly permeable porous texture soils, continuously under rice bed system, you can have manganese deficiency. Alkaline soils, you can have. Reasons for deficiency, solubilization of manganese and its leaching to deeper layers during the rice growing season. Continuous cultivation of rice for 6 to 7 years and depletion of manganese in surface soil. What can be done to correct the deficiency? Like iron, manganese also gets converted to relatively unavailable forms when applied to soil. It gets oxidized. 3 to 4 space with 0.5% soluble manganese sulfate. Wheat grown after rice exhibit manganese deficiency after first irrigation. This has been observed by people. Apply foliar spray of 2 to 3 days before first irrigation. Durum wheats are highly susceptible to manganese deficiency. Therefore, estimum wheats may be grown in manganese deficient areas. So you can remember this point. This may be important for some quiz exam. Durum wheat are highly susceptible to manganese deficiency. So therefore, if that is the case, you have soils low in manganese, go for estimum wheat, not for durum wheat. Boron, the last element for today. Just 2-3 more slides. Membrane integrity. It is essential for membrane integrity. You got plasma membrane or plasma lamina. And cell wall development, which affect permeability, cell division, and extension. Pollen tube growth. So it is actually necessary for germination of pollen as well as tube growth, pollen tube growth, which affect the seed of fruit set and hence yield. In many crops, the foliar spray of boron just before flowering stage starts have been found very beneficial to increase seed yield. Deficiency of this boron, growing points and meristematic tissues affected first, like stem tips, root tips, new leaves, and flower buds. And this is very interesting, death of growing points and deformation of leaves with areas of discoloration. Excess boron, leaf tips become yellow, followed by necrosis, leaves get a exposed appearance and later fall off. So you can see a boron deficiency in maize. You can see the grain numbers of grain quality is affected. And sometimes there may not be any grain formation in maize if you have boron deficiency. You can see this boron deficiency in some fruits and also in cauliflower, browning of curd and lesions in the pith of cauliflower due to boron deficiency. You can see potato also, some blackening is happening due to boron deficiency. And you can also check the leaves of what is this plant? Can you identify this plant, anybody?
Sunflower.
Very good. Excellent. So these are sunflower plants, or you can see their leaves. So what happens in boron deficiency, bud leaves develop a bronze color. Here you can see the change in the colors. Crowded leaves at the top of a plant. You can see such crowding also at the top of the plant in case of boron deficiency. And leaf margins cup downwards. So margins of the leaves can cup downwards like this. And this is another interesting deficiency symptoms in maize. You can see puckering on affected leaves. Puckering means tightly gather or contract into wrinkles or small folds. Like these kind of structure are due to boron deficiency in maize. Transparent stripes on affected leaf. Now, areas affected by boron deficiency are coarse texture soils. Boric acid can wash away. Acid soils, you get boron deficiency. Boron toxicity is possible in highly alkaline soils containing high content of free calcium carbonate. Indiscriminate and regular application of boron fertilizers. They are required in very less amounts. Very less amount, maybe half kg, 1 kg boron per hectare is recommended. So if you use heavy dose of boron fertilizer, then definitely you can have the toxicity. Now, important points about boron. Just few points about boron. Inadequate boron application represent one of the economically most important micronutrient disorders worldwide. At world level, this is more serious deficiency. This is boron deficiency is more serious at world level. If you see at India level, among the micronutrients, it is mostly zinc, but at international level, it is mostly boron. Under high rainfall conditions, in sandy, heavily weathered or acidic soils, boron can be leached easily and boron deficiency severely limits yield. On the other hand, under low rainfall conditions or in the field dominated by alkaline or organic soil, boron often accumulates to levels that are toxic for plants. Irrigation with high boron containing water or without proper drainage also can increase topsoil boron levels and reduce crop yields. So it can increase if you irrigate with boron containing irrigation water. The window between insufficient and toxic boron levels can be quite small. Means very small change in ppms can have toxic effect or deficiency effect. Means one of you was discussing me about the critical deficiency. Means the critical concentration for deficiency. So it is not exactly a particular point, not exactly a particular concentration of a nutrient. It is actually a range. Critical concentration range is there. So you suppose for any element, suppose you say 20 ppm. 20 ppm is the critical limit or critical concentration for deficiency. It is not exactly 20. Means deficiency can be at 22 also. Deficiency can be at say 15 also. So we need to have a range, critical deficiency range, and this critical deficiency concentration may be at the middle point of this critical range. So here the window is very narrow. The range is very narrow. What I mean to say, the critical concentration range of boron is very narrow. In some cases like zinc, it can be, rice plant can tolerate say up to 200 200 milligram, I think at 200 milligram you will have toxicity. So likewise, that range is very narrow in case of boron. Plants respond to an inadequate boron supply with a large number of anatomical, physiological, and biochemical alterations, some of which may be secondary effect of growth inhibition. So this ends the topic today. If you have questions, you can ask me and open your videos and have discussion. Anybody want to have any question, any point of discussion? Yeah, Chandrakant.
No, sir.
No question. So actually, to be honest, I have many classes. I want to teach you many classes, but time is very short. That does not mean that I missed your classes. Whatever classes were possible, I tried to take those classes, except 1 or 2 classes, but I informed in advance to your instructor that I may not be available. Yesterday was the case. So, but I want to teach you 3-4 classes more. And you have to decide yourself, because I want to teach you some phosphorus, some organic matter, and maybe some history of fertilizer, history. Is after so many lectures and practicals, still syllabus is left. And I can tell you with very honestly, means it will not be covered fully by all the instructors. So it is up to you to decide. If you want, that will not have any impact on your examination. That will not have any impact on your examination. If you want, you can fix yourself. I can promise, even if 5 students are there, only 5 students agree and they propose a time, I will take your classes. Or because somebody was saying from 5th October, you have your exams, and in between you will be disturbed for 2-3 days. So for your shifting, etc., whatsoever. So, or we can mutually decide the date also. Means time for lectures. For example, today I cannot take class because I have another class at 4:30. Tomorrow I can take any time. Tomorrow is Friday. I think I do not have any class. So if you want from 10 to 5 or 10 to 6, you can say. 10 to 6, if you want to fix any time, you can fix. If you want those lectures should come to exam, they will come to exam. If you don't want, they will not come to your exam. In one line, my purpose is that if you feel that you want to learn something, I'm ready to teach it. And I don't want to keep myself in the 4 walls of your formal classes. Ye class itne baje hai, that does not matter anything. So it is up to you, and you can give your comments and views immediately, because you might be late for other class. Whatever you want, that will be done. If you decide, don't fear.
So we all will decide a particular time according to your schedule as well, and we'll tell you the timings.
That is the best.
Few more classes.
That is the best thing. That is the best thing. So now I will not ask, I will not make any announcement. Whenever you want, whenever you are free, from my side, this course is over. And whenever you like to have a class, you can inform me 1 day in advance, and I will take your class. Okay?
Okay, sir. So I will discuss and inform.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Okay.